Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting of a special city council meeting to order. It's October 20th, 2021 at 5 p.m. And I see we have our city clerk on the Zoom. So Cindy, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Dennehy.
Here.
Councilmember Gonzalez. Absent. Councilmember Jaquez.
Here.
Councilmember Reed. Absent. Councilmember Schmischer. Here. Councilmember B. Smith.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Here.
Mayor Smith. Absent.
And what we have, thank you very much for that. What we have before us tonight is the discussion of our 2022 budget. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan.
Yeah, tonight you're going to have a presentation from our finance director, Tammy Nordyke, regarding the 2022 budget. There's always a lot that goes into budget season and preparing the budget. We start, late July, early August, preparing the budget and have that to City Council by October 1st. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Tammy to go ahead and start the presentation, and we'll go from there.
Good evening.
Good evening.
When we are doing this budget hearing, we will not be covering every single fund that is in your proposed budget. The budgets that we will not be covering are ones that are either showing for revenue only or are based on donations. So they're very, very small funds, but we do have them accounted for in our total budget. Helps if I turn it on. So our total revenue budget is $38,760,273. The total revenues do not include the use of reserves, operating transfers, the sale of fixed assets, or proceeds from financing. So that's just actually the revenue that is coming in. The total expense budget is $52,634,175. I do have page numbers referenced on these slides that will tie back to the proposed budget if you are wanting to know which pages that they're referencing. For general fund, it is anticipated that we will receive operating transfers from other funds of $955,240, financing proceeds of $487,000, sale of fixed assets of $5,000, and use of the reserves of $4.8 million. Keep in mind, with using that included in using of that $4.8 million is a transfer to the quality of life of $1.5 million. So that is included in there. So it's slightly over $3 million that we're going to be doing. The city will still have 27% of unassigned fund balance remaining at the end of the year.
And just that 1.5 million that's being transferred to quality of life, and Tammy will probably get to this later, just for council's edification, is that's part of the American Recoveries Plan money. So it's money that's been received. It's just being transferred to the appropriate fund for allocation.
It was, as Administrator Stevens mentioned, it was received in 2021. We did not spend it, so it's accounted for at the end of the year in the reserves, and we'll spend it next year. So general fund is broke down into various sections. The first one is general government. This is going to include our administrative functions, the clerk, the community vitality department, IT facilities, and so just so you know, those are the areas that are covered. The IT equipment that is, for $611,500, it calls for the replacement of server, some security networking hardware and software, access control systems, surveillance cameras, and it's anticipated that this funding will come from the American Recovery's funding, so the ARPA funds. So that's one thing we're going to earmark for that. In the maintenance capital, that includes carpet replacement, concrete pad and cover at the museum, asphalt, and then asphalt repair and sealer for the various parking lots of the city-owned buildings. We have the generator budgeted again. If you recall, it was budgeted in the 2021 budget. We did not have any grant funding, and so we did not move forward with the generator. So again, it's being placed in the budget, and we will be researching grant funding for that again to see if we can actually get a backup generator for this building. And then for the building department, that capital equipment calls for the replacement of their pickup truck. For public safety, which is our police department, we do have new personnel requested. The budget that was prepared does show the school resource officers of an addition of 2. Since the budget was put out, we have heard that that is not the direction the school district is going, and so we will be removing the 2 additional officers from that and the associated revenue with that. We are also requested was a parks officer. This also is contingent upon funding from the rec district. If the ballot measures do not pass, then this position will also be removed from the budget. A training sergeant is requested to be added, and then the co-responder. The co-responder is grant funded, and we already do have that funding in place. All of the estimated costs for new personnel are at the highest family rate for insurance, and they include the full burden for the entire year. So if they were hired January 1, we have the full costs in there. And then in order to continue towards working for a 5-year replacement of the police vehicles, we do still have this budget showing utilizing the fleet management lease program. And the program replaces vehicles every year. I think next year we're anticipating four vehicles to be replaced. Is that correct? Yes, 4 vehicles to be replaced. And then we will have an increase in our lease payment. That will come before council, of course, for approval.
And Tammy, do you mind if we ask questions as you go through this?
Oh, that's fine. That's perfectly fine.
So I'm just interested, what have you heard, or Ryan, have you heard what the thinking of the school district is in moving away from school resource officers, or do you have an idea what they plan to do, or what's going on there?
You know, we currently fund 2. This was actually a proposal to add 2 more. One of those was in the county, at McKinley, that is currently being addressed through the sheriff's office, I believe. At this time, they've decided to move forward just at status quo as things are. Chief, I don't know, we have Chief Schick here. He may have more recent data than what I've had.
So basically status quo. If that's
Yes.
what it is, that's fine.
Yep.
Yes.
That's great. And then Have we replaced police vehicles this year?
So we have finally received some of those vehicles. They're at the upfitter now.
They are at the upfit.
It took all year to get those vehicles in because of the chip shortage.
Yes.
But we have started receiving those vehicles, and we are transferring over to upfitting, and hopefully we'll be putting those into the fleet here soon.
And now we're facing the upfitter shortages.
Well, we had already ordered all that equipment, so we were good to go.
So we're good there. Okay, great, good.
Yeah. Yeah,
That'll be
we
good.
had, and earlier in the year, we had went ahead and put the deposit down with the upfitter so he could order all of the equipment ahead of time. So it's all there, and he has the 6 vehicles that have arrived.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, if I may, I had a few questions as well on the Public Safety Department budget, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. One question, Director Nordyke, you had mentioned that the co-responder, that the grant funding is already there. I just wanted to check if that was for both the co-responder that we currently have as well as the additional co-responder that I know Chief Schick had mentioned wanting to add.
So this is for the additional co-responder. One of the things that we're checking on the grant is whether or not that is a law enforcement officer or a mental health professional. And that part of the budget, whether that is a law enforcement officer, which would go into personnel, or if it's behavioral health, we would have to shift that to contracted services. But, we're accounting for the money now.
Thank you so much. And then I just had 2 additional questions. One, I noticed under the police support services budget that the 2021 budget for salaries and wages and the 2022 budget is virtually the same. And I just wanted to better understand how the uptick in salaries was represented in the police support services portion of the police department's budget. Thank you.
I'll let Tammy go into more detail, but one of the things that we did when we built the budget last year for 2021 is we anticipated salary increases for the police department, so some of that was already built into the budget.
And then when we did our budget amendment in August, I want to say it was, we actually increased the 2021 budget for salaries in the police department, so it already had some of that accounted for, plus what we had already previously budgeted.
Thank you so much. So the additional uptick that you're seeking in 2022, essentially that doesn't involve the police department. They were fully covered in the 2021 increase. Am I understanding you well?
Partially. They were partially, the increase was partially shown in the 2021 budget.
So as it relates to the salary study and additional increases, those are not currently delved out in each individual department. That line item is actually in the non-departmental budget so that it can be allocated appropriately once we go through that analysis.
Thank you so much. That answers one of my questions on the non-departmental budget, so I appreciate that. My very last question was also under the police support services. I noticed that the software titles line jumps up by almost 300,000, and I didn't see an explanation, I don't think, in the kind of overview of what the goals are in 2022, so I was hoping for a little bit more clarification on that. Thank you.
A portion of that is that we have shifted some of the costs from the other departments in the police department, the other cost departments, to the support services as well. And then there was also some different programs that we were looking at adding.
So if you look at the next section under police operations, Software titles was 97,000 in 2021, and it's 0 for 2022. That 97,000 is shifted to support services. And then Elijah or Chief, do either of you want to talk about some of those additional software programs that we're looking at?
Good evening. So another portion of the increase is actually part of the dash cam initiative as well. That falls under the software titles because it's a licensing for the software to run the dash cams. And there is also an increase for additional body cam and licensing for digital storage so that we can get everybody licensed to wear a body cam. And that covers the majority of
Thank
the
you.
increase.
Thank you so much, Elijah and Administrator Stevens. Really appreciate that. And I'm so sorry. I did actually have one additional question. At our retreat, I know Chief Shook had mentioned the desire to add another position related to better being able to investigate the cyber aspects of crimes that occur in our community. And I don't think I heard Director Nordyke mention that. Was that something that that didn't quite make it through, or something that's intended for 2023? Thank you.
So one of the things that we looked at was how the police department would operate if it were fully staffed, and we believe that we can accommodate that additional position through a fully staffed department. Chief, do you have any other comments you want to add?
Good evening. No, when we spoke about that at the retreat, I didn't clarify that once we get to full staff, we will have the personnel to make those adjustments and add that layer into our investigations division.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes, so, oh, I'm sorry, Frank, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I just need some clarification because I really never noticed this before. But when we're looking at the police department on page 83, there's a category that says off-duty employment, and there's money. I need a clarification on that. Are we paying our police officers to work off-duty?
So what the off-duty employment line item is that there are contracts that we have our officers go and work, and that company pays us back. So it's at, what is the name of the? Southern Peaks. So our officers go work at Southern Peaks. We classify it as off-duty. Southern Peaks pays us. So they reimburse us for those expenses.
Okay, I knew we were doing that. My suggestion is, if I'm a citizen out there and I'm looking at this, I'm looking at it saying, well, they pay our police department to work off duty. I think we should change that to contract salaries, because that's actually what it is. They're working for Southern Peaks or whatever the case is. So that's really, and I know it's their off-duty time, but the city isn't paying for that. The people that want them are paying for that. So I think we need to change that portion of it to like contract services. I think that would better fit everybody.
Contract employment.
So, yes, please. Thank you.
The next area in general fund is our Public Works Division. This includes engineering, fleet, streets, and I think that should be it. That's bad, I'm trying to remember them all. So with that, we have our capital equipment where we need to replace our fuel station. We need to replace it and have an upgrade. A tandem dump truck with sander and a plow. This is anticipated to be funded using a lease purchase over 3 years. 2021, we paid off the prior 3-year lease purchase, and so they would like to continue and get another heavy, another large piece of equipment and utilize the lease purchase financing on that again. They're also looking at adding a crew cab pickup, converting the forklift. Earlier in the year, we received a forklift from DRMO, that's the federal government, and so we want to convert that to a loader, and so that's what that cost is. And then you will see in general fund, stormwater, and water that everybody is looking at this Lucia hardware and software upgrade. So that impacts 3 different areas, so you'll see that repeated. The projects that we're looking at are some reconstruction, some overlays. Ditch crossings are budgeted. Sidewalk replacement program continues. Downtown alleys. And then we still have some to do with wayfinding kiosks. And then we have the Macon Plaza intersection improvements.
Mayor Pro Tem, could I ask, with the Macon Plaza intersection improvement, what's intended for that? Thank you. Is that just improving the street surface itself, or is that somehow changing that intersection? Thank you.
It's not necessarily changing the intersection. There were some, when the project was originally done, there were some additional steps that were planned for that area, and this is intended to be the next steps of that to complete that project, so we can move on to the next project. And it's easier to show you with a diagram of what's intended than actually explain it. But I could send that out to council.
Thank you.
The last area in general fund relates to culture and recreation. In this covers our museum, the library, and if we have any parks projects. So this budget is not asking for any capital outlay this year. And so the main items are just operating expenses. Now we'll move on to our park improvement fund. It is anticipated that we will receive it is anticipated that we will use $912,379,000 of reserves. Of those reserves, it will be used to help fund the capital outlay. The capital outlay, the largest item is our shop relocation, and that is where those reserves will primarily be used. The budget does also include adding 3 parks maintenance workers, adding 1 additional parks seasonal laborer, continuing with our capital projects. We budget for ADA playground and facility revisions as needed, and then also putting in some permanent splash pad fencing. And the piece of capital equipment that he's looking at is also a backhoe for the cemetery. Any questions?
Yeah, I just have one quick question. Is currently, what is the backhoe that they use for the cemetery? Is that going to be replaced? I know they have one already, but is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, it's a replacement of old equipment.
Replacement of, okay.
The next fund that we'll discuss is our Conservation Trust Fund. This fund is gets its revenue from the lottery proceeds, and it is restricted on how we can spend that money. It has to be used for parks-related items. We are anticipating purchasing a pickup, a commercial turf mower, and that commercial turf mower was budgeted in 2021. It was ordered in 2021, but it will not be delivered until 2022. And so we are budgeting those funds, basically moving them from 2021 to 2022. And then they're also looking to fund a stump grinder attachment. The next fund is our Quality of Life Fund. The primary revenue for the Quality of Life Fund is grant revenues and funding from the Royal Gorge Bridge. Primarily, the Royal Gorge Bridge is used in this fund as matching funds for any of our grants. You will see that under purchased services that account went up significantly. We did put the broadband services in at $1.5 million under purchased services. And it's anticipated to be funded from the ARPA funds. Also, we have our CMAQ projects. Those were not completed this year, and the funding is being allowed to be rolled over into the next year. The next phase of the Red House renovation, and then the Safe Routes to School sidewalk, 9th Street, College, and Washington. And then we also have our US 50 lighting, and then the 115 pedestrian improvements.
Mayor Pro Tem, could I ask for a little bit more clarification on what the long-term phases of the Red House project are? Is this something that will routinely be about $180,000 a year? Or what's the planned timeline and overall expense for the project? Thanks.
I do not have those figures with me this evening. I can reach out to Lisa and get those back, if you are good with that. It is being primarily grant funded. We did have a few expenses this year with it, and then it does look, it's going to be a multi-year program, but it's been grant funded.
Yeah, we can get additional information, but, as Director Nordyke said, we do it based off of grant funding and those grant applications. So we've received the award notification for this particular grant. So future years, it's kind of hard to say because we have to go through that entire grant process to determine. But as far as the work that needs to be done, we can get a list of that work for council.
Thank you. And thank you for clarifying that it's grant funded. It's very challenging to tell which particular line items are what their revenue source is. And since there isn't a detailed budget narrative for each line, it just makes it very challenging to know what we're planning to spend taxpayer dollars on versus what the city has had the ingenuity and hard work to find grants for. So it's great to know that that's grant funded. Thank you.
Yeah, what you'll find in the Quality of Life Fund is all of these projects are grant funded in some form or fashion. With obviously city match for our portion.
Sorry, Ryan, just since you said that, there was a question that I had on the, before we got to the police department, which I'm assuming is related to that, but we hadn't started really asking questions. But on page 73, apologies, it says that there is
The Economic Development Fund?
Yes, it's 1.1 million in a potential grant expense.
Yep. So
So
the line item will change
Go ahead.
when the next budget, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. The line item will change. There were some expected grants that we had applied for, and this was where we were accounting for them. The Main Street Open for Business grant was the big one. It was 800,000 plus. We've received word that we're not receiving that grant. What we will end up doing is, cutting that down. And one of the things that we see now that we have a grant writer is that grant opportunities will come up. This number here, this $1.1 million, it has a corresponding number on the revenue side, so it has matching revenue against it. But this is where we account for grants that we either, we just don't know what's going to come or what's going to become available. So this is where we put those.
Thank you. So just for clarity's sake, and to ensure that I'm understanding you correctly, this is not actually a potential grant expense for the city. This is potential grant revenue. Obviously, it'll be adjusted minus the 800,000
Sure.
that you're hoping that the city will receive. So this is not something that the city needs to match. Am I understanding you well?
It's so this is a potential grant expense, but it's only going to be used if we receive a grant award. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? And
So it's a
another
potential-
place in the budget, there's revenue that matches this. So we receive the revenue in as a grant, and then we have to expend it somewhere, and this is where that gets expended. And at the end of the year, the finance department will allocate that depending on what the grant was and where it should actually go in the budget.
Perfect. Thank you.
If you look on page 33 of the budget, there is a line that says DOLA grants of $1.1 million. That is where we had accounted for the potential grant revenue.
Thank you, Director Nordyke.
The next fund we will discuss is our two-way street improvement fund. This is funded from the additional 1% sales tax. We are anticipating $4 million in projects and then our annual debt service payment. For our water fund, our charges for service include, the charges for service and water fund include the usage fees for water. The 2022 revenue projection was determined using our historical actuals. While the number is less than our previous year, we feel that it's still more conservative approach to the budget. And then the revenue shown above does not account for any transfers in. The intergovernmental revenue that is shown is the portion of the ARPA funds to be used towards the Reynolds project. The increase in the miscellaneous revenue is primarily due to the anticipated rebate from the MCC project. We're anticipating getting that in next year once we actually get everything completed and installed. The 2022 anticipated water mains to be replaced in 22, of course, 22 includes Rhodes, Grand Avenue, and Reynolds. So that's what the majority of our $2.5 million in capital outlay refers to. Also, we do have some pickup trucks budgeted, a server, copier, mobile data collector, flatbed dump truck, mini excavator, and then the continuing of the MCC upgrade. And then also the filter media replacement. The stormwater revenue is showing down from 2021, and that is primarily because we will not have the proceeds from debt or proceeds from financing. Because if you recall, earlier in 2021, we did enter into a lease purchase agreement for our vac truck. Our capital projects include the various stormwater projects throughout the city. Anticipating purchasing a 4x4 pickup for the stormwater crew. Property acquisitions that may be needed to go along with our projects. And then their portion of that hardware and software upgrade. Finance will be working with the Public Works Director to determine which costs will be associated with the MS4 permit.
One other note there, under capital outlay, the Rhodes Avenue project, we're still anticipating to start that this year, so some of that may be carried over till 2022 as well.
So the charges in our self-insurance fund include the premiums paid by both the city and the employee. The 2022 revenue is based on the estimated revenue from what we had for 2021. So we use that as a base and went forward. We are anticipating a 3% increase in premiums. The changes that we implemented in 2022 to have premium increases every year, even when our reserves are above our target, it is making the self-insurance plan more sustainable. As if we are anticipating having $1.2 million in reserves at the end of 2021, and then 1.28 at the end of 2022. Typically, they want you to have between 700 and 900,000. And so we still are going to continue to have those slight increases to make sure that we don't get in the situation where we were a few years ago when we had to pass on an 8% increase. So we're maintaining a smaller increase, and we are accounting for a 3% increase in 2022. Believe it or not, we did have capital items that we did not fund. The main one, we had our Main Street program, or the Main Street downtown improvements. We also funded some items below requested. We did not fund 100% of the downtown alleys of that request or the sidewalk replacement program. And part of that reasoning is because with the loss of the Black Hills franchise fee, that's what was helping fund those programs, and so we're not able to fund them at the previous levels.
And so, just so that I understand that, what that means is that we did have, for instance, citizens who said, I would like to take advantage of the sidewalk replacement program, and we had to say no because of our lack of Black Hills funds. Is that, do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, there's less opportunity. I don't know that we've denied anybody under the current funding, but there's less opportunity. We're not promoting it as much as we did in the past and things like that.
Will the program still exist in the 2022 budget?
Yes. Yeah. It's an important program to have, and we're just funding it out of general fund proceeds.
Thank you.
So we have items for consideration by council. As part of our annual budget process, we also determine what our utility rates are going to be for the next year. We have two different proposals, a 3% increase, which is essentially just a inflationary increase, or the 9% increase, which is what the rate study had originally called for. If we do the 3% increase, the annual estimated amount for a customer who uses 10,000 gallons of water a month, it would cost them $13.74 extra a year. If it is the 9%, it would be an extra $41.22 a year. And our budgeted revenue is based just on what our historicals have been, so it does not reflect any increase in the revenues.
And I want to point out that that's a consumer price inflationary increase. And, you know, we have Travis Payne from the Water Department, our water superintendent here. Travis, you want to come up and talk about what chemical prices are doing to treat the water?
So in conversations with some of our chemical providers, it's been kind of an average increase that they're saying to expect is about 15% on that 235 line item. Additionally, with water distribution on the 260 line item, which is a lot of our like repair parts, stuff like that, they're saying to expect anywhere from 18 to 20%. And those are kind of, like I say, some of our main line items for our O&M budgets. So we're seeing just a normal cost of doing business going up by quite a lot of percentage. So that's kind of driving our desire for a rate increase.
Travis, could you estimate what the increased cost is? I mean, the difference between last year versus this year? I mean, in round numbers, do you have some idea what type of money we're talking about here?
So for like 235, the additional 15.9% that we requested is about 34,000.
Excuse me, I'm not asking what we're requesting.
Okay.
What I'm asking is what the impact to the increases from suppliers are to the water department. So in other words, in round numbers, how much more are you going to be paying in '22, do you think, than you did in '21?
Sure, and that is kind of the answer to the question as far as like the chemical providers, is that number, is the 34,000 number.
So
Because that was the 15% increase.
So 30, the direct
water
impact
treatment.
to our water department from just the chemical increase is going to be 34,000.
That is correct.
Thank you.
And for distribution, an 8% increase is what we budgeted for, which was about 25,000. So that was for the distribution division.
And I also, if I recall correctly, part of what the rate study said is that we really have some unfunded capital liability issues that we're trying to address with talking about rate increases here too.
Yeah, the 9% is intended to get you towards those capital items that are unfunded. This year, what we're looking at is that 9% may cover, probably not even cover some of those increases based off of inflationary pressures.
Yes. And of course, what that means as council people is that if we kick this can down the road, somebody's going to pay the price at some point. Some council is going to have to really look at a big increase.
Yep.
Could I ask what the anticipated revenue would be for the 3% and the 9%? I understand that the annual increase, if a family used X amount, would be that, but what do we think the overall annual increase in revenue would be? I know a lot of people's property taxes have gone up and taxes in a lot of ways have gone up. So just want to make sure that we're really looking at this very, very carefully, because I know none of us want to unnecessarily increase taxes, but obviously, as John said, or as Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick said, it's very important that we don't kick the can down the road either. So if we have about 60,000 additional or 59,000 additional in inflationary costs, it would be helpful to know what the anticipated revenue of 3% or 9% would be. Thanks.
I do not have that number in front of me. We can get that back to council, but if you take the annual increase for the residential inside city limits of $41.22, and I don't know how many inside city limit customers we have, but if we just took that times, 10,000 customers? And so then you would have about, hold on one second. About 412,000 at the 9% and about 137,400. But you have to also take into consideration that we have non-residential customers as well. And then we also have outside city limits, so that figure could actually be different than that, but that's just a rough estimate. We can get that back to you, though.
So, may I?
Just
Sure, absolutely.
Sorry, as an interjection on that too. Operating revenue of the 2022 budget, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tammy, but that's pretty much metered sales. And so you could just take a 9% of the 6.3 million, basically, and you get a little over 500,000. So that's kind of a quick and dirty.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor Pro Tem, this is Kim Swearingen. May I speak?
Absolutely.
I would just like to reiterate a couple of things. First of all, that Ryan said that this 9%, if it's a study-based number, it is, of course, not just about our increasing inflationary costs, but, of course, our capital costs. And then to reiterate what Mayor Pro Tem said is that if we kick this can down the road, we're looking at rate increases of like in the 10s and 15%. If we, put it off many years. So coming from a capital perspective, and if we want to make sure that our capital fund is, in fact, cash heavy or not heavy, but cash rich in the fact that we aren't having to go out and fund debt service to fund various capital projects that may or may not, depending on what they are, become an emergency situation, which we never want. We always want to be a little bit proactive when it comes to water infrastructure. So just keep those in mind that when we're talking about revenues, it's great to understand that, but it's not just about increasing operating costs, but also about, those various capital costs. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
An additional point on that was these 9% raises were supposed to be starting in 2018 every year. I think 2018 we had a 6%, 2019 we had a 3%, 2020 we had a 3%, 2021 we had a 3%, and 2022 remains to be seen. But every one of those years was supposed to be 9% based on this study.
Thank you for reminding me.
I'm so sorry.
I just comment here quickly, Councilmember Schmisser, that thank you for reminding us that actually this council has been doing a little can kicking here too. Yes, please go ahead.
I'm so sorry, Mayor Pro Tem. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just wondering if it would be possible to either receive the study or be pointed to where that is for my own edification. Thank you.
Yes, we can get a copy of the rate study over to you.
Thank you.
Also, with the rate increase, we do show what the impact would be for non-residential inside city limits. An annual increase for 3% would be approximately $13.89 based on 10,000 gallons a month, or $41.66, again, based on the 10,000 gallons per month. We did want to make sure that we showed both of those. And again, that's just the inside city limits rates, but we would be increasing all of the rates.
Are we being asked this evening to make a decision on the rate increases?
We're asking for a direction, so when we bring the ordinance forward, we can bring forward the correct ordinance. What we've done in the past, though, is if there is not clear direction tonight, we can bring forward an ordinance both for 3% and one for 9%.
Yes, Tim.
Thank you. And Travis, thank you. That's great information, and I understand where you need the increase. And I think you understand where we stand. You know, just, it's tough for us to, and especially here. I don't know if this is something that we could look at, is like you said, and go down the road. Maybe we meet partway and go 6% or 7% this year, and then ease it each year. But it's tough, you know, and I'm not saying for, if anybody's rerunning for council, if somebody's worried about that, that's not why I'm saying this. I'm saying just because that 6%, realistically, it's not that much money when we look at how much it's increasing us per year. But that's my opinion, and there's probably people on the low end or a different revenue structure than me, and some of us that might say that is a big increase for us. But I didn't know if maybe that's something as council we want to look at and say, okay, maybe we don't go that, you know, the 6, or, you know, keep it at 3%, but maybe we take it at 5 or 6% this year, and then we'd say we're going to increase this 1% each year until we get to that 9% increase, so we can get the capital, get the extra things, so our water department has exactly the funds that it needs to function.
So in response to that, Councilman Dennehy, do you have the water rate study? Do you have a copy of that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, okay, all right.
I think that's what Kim was saying, though, is that if we increase it 1% until we get to 9, by the time we get to 9, we're going to need 15 or 17%. So as much as I hate to raise any rates, the necessity of inflation and capital projects kind of ties our hands. But personally, because there's so many people missing, I would say to do up to 2 drafts for when it comes to council, just because with mayor missing and council members Reed and Gonzalez missing, I would hate to give a thumbs up for them with them not being here.
And if I may, one of the things we got to remember, and let's go back, I forget when it happened, but Councilmember Meisner said, folks, we can't keep kicking the can down the road, okay? Somewhere along the line, we have to do it, okay? And if we keep kicking it down, then eventually that can is going to get bigger than our foot to kick it, okay? So I would, you know, my suggestion is we look at this, if we look at this with the 9%, hopefully that'll be helpful with regards to the future increases that we might have to make. Because we don't know what's going to happen to our water services between here and now. And it's not as if they're trying to look at it the best possible way they can. No one's come in here and say, you haven't done anything for all these years, just 6%, and now we need a 15%. They're still looking at it, and they say, because what we have done in the past, maybe now it's time to look at a valuable 9% increase to maintain what we have and hopefully avoid a collision down the roadway with a higher rate that really, really will affect everybody, not just the lower income, not just the business people. It'll affect each and every one of us. So it's a point to think, and I agree with Councilman Smith that we can look at something with regards to, and this is why I wish when we have meetings like this, the more of us would participate and actually show up to be here. I understand we all have reasons for not being here, and I don't take that away from anybody. But the thing about it is, we have to look at what we're going to do to help keep the city maintaining the services that we have, and also having the money to help improve what we need to improve down the roadway, because there's a lot of improvement that needs to be done down the roadway. Thank you.
Okay.
So I'm hearing direction to bring both ordinances forward, both versions.
It's probably better to do it that way, although if we were going thumbs up around here, you know, we really, the risk that we run is that there's a major failure in the system that we don't have the capital money to address. And that means either borrowing, which is not a good idea, or you cut back on services, which we, you know, is absolutely not a good idea. And so it's the proverbial rock in a hard place, but based on all that, I think that we have to look at the 9%, but I'm great with bringing it back both ways. Yes, Tim?
The only thing I wonder, and I'm going to go with Frank here on this because I understand what he's saying. We can bring it back, but there still might be 2 or 3 of us absent. And, you know, this is where we're kicking it down the road again, and is this something that we really need to do?
Yeah, but like I say, there's 5 of us here, okay? I'm granted there's 2 absent, but there's 5 of us here, okay? You know, and it just takes, and maybe us 5 here, if the other 2 aren't there at the next go-around, it just takes us to decide, because that's our job. Do we want to do this regardless if there's just 5 and not 7? Because nobody knows what's going to happen down the roadway. So it's something for us, each one of us, to keep pondering and think about in case this situation comes again.
Like next year. Yes, Ryan?
Do you mind if we ask Councilwoman Schmischer for her input on this, please?
Not at all.
I had just unmuted to ask Mayor Pro Tem if I could give a little bit of input. And apologies for not being there in person. I'm in a horrible hotel room in Texas, and but I'm so glad for modern technology. So I really understand the inflationary costs and the 60,000, and I feel like I don't have that level of detail on the capital issues. And in part, that's because I don't have the rate study, so I haven't had a chance to review that. But I would love to really understand where we are with our capital fund and where we need to be so that I feel more comfortable with a larger increase. I never want to increase taxes, and I think increasing taxes on something that's as basic as water is really hard because, you know, it is real money. And we have a lot of people in the city of Canyon City who are on fixed incomes. And so that is always of concern. And I know that that's a concern that the rest of the council shares as well. But I think because I am so new, I haven't seen that rate study, and I don't have the level of fidelity and understanding about where we are with our capital fund that I would like to, in order to be able to support that. So that's kind of where I am, and I'm really looking forward to getting that information and making sure that I can make an informed decision. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we'll get you the rate study, and just to clarify for the public, they are rates, not taxes. Taxes would have to go through a TABOR.
I just think for the sake of city staff and administration, rather than bring one to the table that gets voted down, it would make more sense to bring them, both of the ordinance forward for time-saving purposes. That way, we don't have to wait for another meeting or something to vote on another ordinance.
Yeah, and we're happy to do that. We've done that in the past. It's not much additional work. We're happy to provide those options.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, this is Kim Swearingen again. May I?
Sure.
My apologies.
You may be cutting out, Kim.
For some reason, I'm not hearing you. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
My apologies. Yes, I appreciate that, Mayor, Councilwoman Schmisser. I would like to point you to, just so that you know, if you can look in the budget, if you look down the road in, I believe it is on page 189, I believe. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble seeing that on my phone, but you can see the capital that is planned in the next 5 years, just to give you an idea before you get the rate study, so you can kind of see that those are expenses that have been targeted by the water department for improvement. Kind of gives you an idea of what they have done to prepare for a rate study. Also, too, just wanted to reiterate that they are fees for a service, and water is that product. So thank you. It's not taxes.
Yeah, and that is page 188.
Thank you for flagging that for me. I appreciate it. And apologies that I don't use, exactly the right term. Understand that it does have legal implications with Tabor. I always just view it all as taxes, but understand that it is a fee. Thank you.
Amy?
The next rate increase that that City Council needs to consider is an increase in our stormwater rate. The charter does state the way we need to calculate our rate. That was calculated, and looking at what that rate says versus what the inflationary rate says, staff would recommend that council go with an inflationary rate only. And with that, the 3% residential increase would be approximately $6.01 annually, which is about 50 cents a month. And for commercial, it's about $30.94 annually, or $2.58 a month. And that is based on our average impervious values that are shown in this slide. We will be, when we present the ordinance to City Council to adopt the budget, you will see changes. Part of those are going to be projects that were started in 2021 that will need to be carried forward into 2022. So those changes will be included. The tree row fencing that we had budgeted for 2021 came in significantly over what we had budgeted. So we will need to go ahead and add costs in for 2022, and we will go out to bid again on that. It's also anticipated, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, that tree row fencing that we're discussing is the fencing along Veterans Park versus the railroad, to make sure that we don't have people just walking out from Veterans Park onto the railroad tracks.
And we're also anticipating, there's been some discussion about possibly some revenue coming in from the 150th celebration. We will add that revenue in. We also will have revenue from the URA for the costs associated with utilizing city staff. We will also need to account for the increment payment to the URA. And then, as mentioned earlier, we will be removing the 2 proposed SROs, so school resource officers, and their associated revenue. There are additional items in the appendix. It's basically a summary of what was covered. One item that is in here that we did not discuss yet was there is a 1.5% increase budgeted for cost of living for all employees. There's also the next phase of the compensation study accounted for. As Administrator Stevens mentioned, that expense is accounted for in our non-departmental. So the expense is already accounted for. It's just not allocated to each budget. And then with the next phase of the compensation study, there is no merit increase yet because we're not fully implemented with the compensation study. So we will be bringing back to City Council the anticipated pay scales for 2022 for council's approval, which would show a 1.5% increase in the pay scales. The other item is our health insurance, which we discussed as having a 3% increase. And then with our police retirement, the pension it's a mandatory 0.5% increase to the employer contribution every year until 2030. And in order for us to help offset some of that burden to the city, we are reducing the contribution that the city makes to the police officers, 457, by that 0.5% annually until basically it's washed out. We're anticipating that will be gone by 2027. And then any increase that we have in the death and disability portion is being passed on to the officers. Currently, the city pays 95% of that contribution. Right now, I think it's a total of 3%, so it's 2.8 to the city and about 0.2% to the officers. And if you refer to pages 183 and 184 in your budget book, that is the authorized positions that are included in the 2022 proposed budget. If you refer to our five-year capital improvement plan, that's referenced in pages 187 through 188, you will see a complete listing of all of our capital items. Which includes both capital equipment and our capital projects.
May I ask a question, Mayor Pro Tem?
Sure.
So just for clarity's sake, in the capital improvement plan, everything that's listed in the 2022 proposed budget is actually proposed to be funded in the 2022 proposed budget. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and I know that there had been some discussion in the water arena that there were some capital projects that were not. Is it just that they've been pushed to 2023 or other out years?
If projects were not funded in 2022, we did push them out into future years.
Okay, and then could I also ask for just maybe a 30-second to 1-minute synopsis of what the second phase of the pay increase covers? I understand that it's not merit, but is it that not all positions were increased, or is it that positions were only increased part of the way to get them to where the rate study said that they should be? If I could just ask for a little bit more on what phase 2 is. Thank you.
Yes, so the first phase brought employees into the new structure and adjusted for time in position. And we did not let anybody go above midpoint. The second phase now looks at, again, time in position and helps move them still further into the range, but it also takes into account education and experience.
Thank you.
And for City Council's reference, we do have what our monthly premiums are for our health insurance. Essentially, we are having a 3% increase. It does cover medical, dental, and vision. We do have a Plan A and a Plan B. The major differences on that is that in Plan A, the city has more exposure on what is covered under the plan, because there's a lower deductible for the employee. And so the employee has higher rates with Plan A than they would under Plan B. And so with Plan B, the employee has more exposure to the deductible. It's a higher deductible and larger copays. And with that, that is all that I have for you this evening.
Thank you for that, and perhaps, Ryan, tell us a little bit about schedule.
So we will make some changes. We found some typos and things like that, so we want to clean up the budget. We are anticipating bringing this back to City Council at the second meeting in November. I believe that's November 15th for first reading, and then we will bring any rate increases forward at that time as well. And then second reading will be the first meeting in December, which is December 6th. And we don't have a second meeting in December, so I hope to have it all wrapped up by then.
John,
Yes.
can I make one final statement? Before we close, I want to make one final statement with regards to what I said with regards to council members, trying to get us all here together. One of the things that I want everybody to know, that this council that we have right now works real good with each other, okay? And we're always okay with regards to, if somebody isn't here, that the decisions of those people that are at the meetings will take into consideration their feelings, because that's how we work, okay? No council is 100% on everything, okay? But this council we have now is close to that 100%. So if someone isn't going to be here, excuse me, I feel strongly, because there's been some meetings where there was a decision to be made, excuse me, and I couldn't be there. But I felt confident in the decision that those council members that would be at that meeting would make the proper decision for the jobs and the titles we were looking at. So that's what I want to make sure everybody understands. We work real good together as a team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Jaquez. Do we need to vote on this, Ryan?
No, there's no vote tonight.
No vote tonight.
Just,
So-
you'll need to close your public hearing, and we'll bring this forward, as I said, on November 15th.
And seeing no members of the public present.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Sure, yes.
Apologies. May I make one final comment as well?
Sure.
I just wanted to recognize how much hard work goes into this, not only by Administrator Stevens and Finance Director Nordyke, but each and every city employee, I'm sure, has contributed to this preparation in some way. And I just really appreciate everything that goes into figuring out what's the best way to spend taxpayer dollars, and what's the best way to make sure that we have a city that we all can be really proud of and want to live in. So just thank you for all the hard work that you do every day, and all of the additional work that's required during budget preparation season. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schmisser. So where we are now, there are no members of the public, unless someone would like to make a public comment as a private citizen. And so I will close this public hearing. And we do not need to vote tonight, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. So with that then, I believe we are adjourned.